Assalamu alaikum. Very impressive, wasn't it? Right? I mean, the bomb at the end. Okay, inshallah, tonight we will have a different format in our convention in one of the sessions.
Want to keep this in case you get a smoke?
And since this is a very important topic, which is the election, we know what happened in 2016, and we know how much heat was for the 2018 elections, and God knows what the 2020 elections will look like. So the convention team wanted to have a special session on the election, but we wanted to be more participatory between the speakers and the audience. Since this is the first time, we don't know how this is going to be practical and how this is going to be workable. But before going through, of course, I'm very delighted and honored to have two special guests with us here. And I would like to, of course, talk about Sister Dalia Mogahed, who is one of the guest speakers for tonight. Sister Dalia Mogahed is the Director of Research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, where she leads the organization's pioneering research and thought leadership programs on American Muslims. Sister Mogahed is formerly Executive Director of the Gulf Center for Muslim Studies, where she led the analysis of surveys of Muslim communities worldwide. With John Esposito, she co-authored the book, Who Speaks for Islam? What a Billion Muslims Really Think. President Barack Obama appointed Sister Mogahed to the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based Initiatives. And also, she was invited to testify before the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations about the U.S. engagement with Muslim communities. Her 2016 TED Talk show was named one of the top TED Talks that year. She is a frequent expert commentator on global media outlets and international forums. She is also the CEO of Mogahed Consulting. Please show her how much you really appreciate her presence with us tonight. The second speaker, which was featured part of the introduction here, is nobody but Dr. Abdul Saeed, who you have heard a lot about him, is a physician. I'm not going to spell this one here. It's a medical terminology. I'm sorry, it's very complicated here. Public health expert and progressive activist. Dr. Abdul ran for governor of Michigan in 2018 with endorsement from Senator Bernie Sanders, Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the nation. Prior to that, Dr. Abdul served as health commissioner in Detroit, where he rebuilt Detroit's health department after it had been privatized during the city's municipal bankruptcy. Appointed at 30 years old, he was the youngest health official in major U.S. cities. Prior to his public service, Dr. Abdul was tenure-track faculty at Columbia University's Department of Epidemiology. Okay. With over 100 peer-reviewed publications. Very impressive indeed. Dr. Abdul holds a doctorate in public health from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, as well as a medical degree from Columbia University. He graduated with the highest distinction and Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Michigan, where he was student commencement speaker alongside President Bill Clinton. Please show Dr. Saeed how much we really love to have him with us here tonight. As you may have noticed, election in 2016 was a bombshell that night, that Tuesday night, when the results came very unexpectedly. The House completely changed. Actually, the entire Congress and the White House all went Republican. And then we had to deal with all the issues our president is bringing to the table to entertain the American people. In 2018, it was really a year that is marked with heated election campaigns. And the first time we have seen a noticeable presence of Muslims in these elections. I would like to give, for each of our guests here, their quick look at 2018 elections, how it turned out. And then the next segment of our show tonight, we will be talking about where we go heading 2020. So I would like to start with Sister Dalia Mogahed. Tell us what you think, based on the analysis that you have done and the observation from the nation, what it was 2018 for the Democrat, for the Republican, for the president, and most important of all, to the American people. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, was-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. You know, I think that 2018 was the culmination of all the pent-up energy, anxiety, worry of 2016. The shock that so many people had at the outcome of that election was manifested in the energy that we saw in 2018. 2018, we had more Muslims and more people of color in general running for office than any other year in our country's history. It was a year where we found, yes, it's something to celebrate, absolutely. It was a year of firsts. We had the first Muslim women ever elected to Congress. You know, a proud Palestinian American and a proud Somali American, and including, of course, Ilhan, who also wears hijab. So you had visibly Muslim people and people with very overt identities running for office. We have a history-making person right here we're going to hear from. So 2018, I felt, was a time truly to celebrate the way that people were channeling the energy and the anxiety that we were seeing and even measuring in our analysis and in our data from the 2016 election and the outcome of that election. But the flip side of that is we saw unprecedented voter suppression in 2018. Voter suppression that cost people elections. And I think this is very important because when we look at why people don't vote is because the main reason, at least in our community, is because they don't think it matters. They don't think their vote counts. And we saw in 2018 how sometimes votes were decided by 10, 20, 12, 30 people on the state level, on the city level, on the county level. And the length to which the other side is suppressing votes. If your vote doesn't matter, why are they working so hard to keep you from it? Ask yourself that the next time you are thinking of not going to vote. And then finally, and I'll end with the third sort of trend that we saw, it was in terms of not just Muslims running for office, but Muslims participating in every other way, as campaign staff, as folks who are donating to campaigns, but as people who are registered to vote. 2018 was a record year for Muslim American voter registration, and that is something to celebrate and to have as a jumping off platform for the 2020 election.
Thank you. Dr. Sayed, your analysis, I think, will come from the heart because you've been through the process of campaign. The process, which is really very important, is not just calling up on our community to come and vote, which is very important, but you are reaching out to all American people in your district, your constituent, and to tell them, vote for me because I want to bring change for you. In your experience, what was 2018 to run for governor in the state of Michigan, being a Muslim, under Trump? May God help you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I really appreciate the question. I want to provide some context though. For a long time, our community has waited for somebody to come and tell us that we were in fact just as American as everyone else. We were waiting for permission. The fact is though, is that power doesn't work that way. Power doesn't give itself up. Power has to be engaged, wrestled with, and taken. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in what we saw in 2018 is that the community decided that we were not going to wait until one group of politicians tried to erase us from this country. Instead, we as a community were going to stand up and say that if our country is built on a constitution that starts with the three words, we the people, we are included in we the people, and we will stand up and take our place among that fabric of what makes America what it is. And it took us realizing that there were people who wanted to push us out for us to include ourselves in. And I think it's easy to point to the tips of the icebergs. Incredible people like Representatives-elect Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who comes from the great state of Michigan. Just put that out there. And look at them and say, that is Muslim political engagement. But what I think is actually the most incredible thing to come out of the races that were run, 700 people who ran, who were openly Muslim, are two things. Number one, if you look at, by and large, the platforms that Muslim Americans ran on, they were inclusive platforms that stood up for a conception of America that wasn't just about us, but was about building the kind of country in which we and any other person can live, the kind of inclusive America that says that all of us are part of this thing. And number two, there's a lot of work that goes into politics. It's not just what you see on TV, it is all of the doors that are knocked, it is all the fundraisers that are held, it is all the money that is given, it is all the conversations that are had. And for the first time, our community was realizing that we had to engage in the nitty-gritty of politics, not just for Muslim American candidates, but for candidates across the board. And more than anything else, beyond the people who are elected who represent our community, it is this political engagement, that culture of political engagement, people who came up in these 2018 campaigns, who learned the work of politics, that I think, to me, is the most exciting part about this entire moment in our politics. And I want to say one last thing. Oftentimes, it's easy in our community to look at wins and be validated by the wins. But to me, to be quite honest, it's the fact that we were willing to show up. In our community in Michigan, estimates suggest that we were able to increase Muslim voter turnout by about 40%, which is a big deal in the most Muslim dense state in the entire country. But importantly, even beyond our primary, even beyond coming out to vote for a Muslim American at the top of the ticket, those folks came out in the general election too. What we're seeing is that this culture has shifted. It's not going back just because there are Muslim Americans who are running, but in fact, our political culture has changed. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Thank you. You know, in 2018, that was big hype among Democrats. that they want to regain the House. We all thought that they're going to do better with the Senate. As a matter of fact, they lost in the Senate more than they won in the Senate, but they did take control of the House. In my own personal view, I always asserted that Trump was good for the Muslim community. In what sense? Of course, not because of his Muslim ban, but he really awakened amongst ourselves and inside us the need to be more participating community, more engaged community. How much do you see from your studies and your research that the community may come to the point where we could be a broker in some districts? We cannot claim to really be able to make much change in elections unless it's in a district where Muslim population can make difference in that particular district, which could be a critical one. So how much do you see from the Muslim community taking advantage of the environment, which is supportive right now for Muslims and other minorities, that can be projected for 2020? What we really need to do to capitalize on this, what we have accomplished, it was great to have two sisters go into Congress on the watch of Donald Trump. This is a huge accomplishment. This is not an easy thing. But going forward 2020, what's your expectation?
Well, I never make predictions. I'm too much of a researcher to do that. But what I think we need to keep in mind is a couple things. First of all, we don't, in the United States, we have, the presidential election is by no means the only election that matters, right? And when you look at districts like my district in Northern Virginia, Muslims are a very important component of who wins Northern Virginia. And we are catered to by elected officials. They know that we matter in that district. There are lots of districts like that all over the country. So we can't look at things just as in terms of the fact that we're 1% of the nation. We're densely populated in some very important states, including many swing states. So that's one thing to keep in mind. We do matter in a lot of very important swing states, Michigan being one of them, Ohio being another, Florida being another. The second thing is we're never going to win by ourselves. We have to build coalitions. And what was so exciting about Abdul's run, about Rashida's run, about Ilhan's run, is how much they were able to build coalitions. The folks that came out and voted for them, the vast majority of these people were not Muslims. We have to keep that in mind. They were able to win over people from across the spectrum of race, of religion, who believed in their vision of our country, a vision where everyone counts, a vision where there is justice for all, not just for us. So I think that the second lesson from 2018 is how we need to reach out and see ourselves as being called to certain values from our faith that appeal deeply with so many other people. And then finally, the third thing that I think is very important to keep in mind is that there is a very important demographic shift that's happening in our country right now. And it explains a lot of this rise of white nationalism that you're seeing. This demographic shift basically says that by 2050, or before, our country is going to be majority non-white. And this is scaring a lot of people. I think we have to think about this very carefully. And in some cases, I think we need to reassess how we are viewing our future. And when I say our, I'm talking to the audience in this room who are the, majority, very similar to me, Arab or South Asian. We have for too long subconsciously or consciously seen our success as, for lack of a better term, aspirational whiteness. First, I think that this is principled. It is something that we should give up because it's not principled, but also it's not even strategically in the best interests of our community. Our future in this country, because of our faith values and because of just the reality of demographics, is to align ourselves with the most vulnerable, to align ourselves with the people that the Prophet ﷺ aligned himself with. Our Prophet, brothers and sisters, was born into a place of privilege. He was nobility. He was at the top of an unjust hierarchy, and he gave up that place of privilege for the sake of his principles, to preach and to teach and to spread and to give us a message that preached human equality. He gave up privilege for principle. We should not ever give up principle for the false promise of privilege.
Thank you. This really leads us to the next question to Dr. Saeed. You ran on a platform. You connected with your constituent. You tried to explain to your voters that you are issue-oriented. And you said, don't look who I pray to, but look for what I pray for. And you explained that you have issues for the Michigan people that you want to serve. And that really what sets aside or make a big difference when American Muslims want to run. We're not running because we are the underdog, we are the ones who attack, please come and vote for me. No, actually you went there and said, I am for you, I want to fight for you, I want to make better government for you. What do you think was the most important thing that you have convinced the voter and even the Democratic Party that you are a major player in their elections because you advanced? I mean, you were one of the top predictions that you could be winning the primary. How important is it for you, for every American Muslims who want to run in 2020, to connect and to make those issues as your main campaign? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I really appreciate the question. We have this tendency in our community to pretend like somehow there's a bubble between Muslim issues and non-Muslim issues. I was raised in my household where my father was an immigrant from Egypt, my stepmom who raised me, white American, a daughter of the American Revolution, that my Islamic principles, that if I was to see injustice, that I should change it with my hands, and if I couldn't change it with my hands, I should change it with my tongue, and if I couldn't change it with my tongue, I should change it in my heart, recognizing that that's the least of my faith. The idea that our God orders us to seek justice, اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى, that those were not any different than my American principles. You talk to young people these days, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, you ask them, what does it mean to you to be Muslim? And oftentimes they're really good at telling you what that means they cannot do. I don't eat pepperoni pizza. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't date. But we're not as good at teaching our young people about what it means that we ought to do. And our Prophet ﷺ was very clear about this. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمْ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Very, I was only sent to insist upon good character. And if you think about what that means, those ideals are exactly what this country was built on. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal. We've got a responsibility, if that is true, to recognize that there aren't Muslim issues and non-Muslim issues. Racism is a Muslim issue. Sexism is a Muslim issue. Poverty is a Muslim issue. Those are issues that we ought to be running on because they are Muslim issues, they are American issues, and they are about the justice and humanity. And to me, my platform was about living out my personal ideals. Now, when I decided to run, a lot of people said, you know, you should change your name. And my name, Abdul, is already a shortened version of my actual name, which is Abdurrahman. How much shorter do you want me to go? Right? They said you should change, you should shave your beard. Maybe you should really reconsider how much you put your wife who wears a hijab in your campaign literature. And we made a strategic decision that every commercial that we put out, Sara was right in the commercial. Because we cannot run away from who we are, we can only embrace who we are. And there's something in American politics that's actually quite beautiful. It's that more than anything else, the coin of the realm is authenticity. People can see through the garbage, the baked and polished, that you see with every campaign and every candidate. If you come out and you be who you are and you're honest about who you are and you don't apologize for who you are, and you take who you are and say, this is what who I am does in the world. I'm somebody who wants to make sure people have health care. I'm somebody who wants to take care of the poor and the vulnerable. I'm somebody who wants to undo racist structures in our country. I'm somebody who fights for the orphan and the person who does not have power in this system. I will stand up to power every time I see it oppressing someone else. That is who I am as a Muslim and an American. That authenticity speaks for itself. And if we're serious about political engagement in the future, the most important thing I think that comes out of this moment is that there were a lot of young people working for candidates who stood up and engaged their communities, their broader Muslim and non-Muslim communities, to speak about a politics. That training of actually doing the work of talking about why you believe what you believe with people who may or may not believe what you believe, that's the work of politics. That work, that's what has to continue. So, you know, alhamdulillah, we did not win our primary, but we did earn 340,000 votes. 340,000 people who marked their check next to a name that was Abdul al-Sayed. But the important thing was that they knew what they were voting for. And it didn't matter that I was Muslim. That wasn't their issue. It was what we were talking about, founded in my core as both an American and a Muslim.
Jazakallah khair. The old saying, which is always current and always true, all politics are local. In order for us to really be engaged, you have to be in all different elected positions running for. Whether you are in a school district, whether you are a commissioner, whether you are in a library, whether you are running for city council, state rep. I mean, yeah, it is all forms, because that will build our political machine. But I think it's very important, two things that I always found to be true and crucial. One, in order for us, sometimes, again, you have to work with your community. We really need to have a vote where a Muslim vote can be noticed and can be sought after. See, we say that your vote is really your voice, and it is how people will hear you. Political candidates, they like you to vote, even if you did not vote for them. That means you are a potential voter. They need to go after you, and there's a good possibility that they can persuade you to vote for them. So to vote is really key. Not to vote, you are absolutely nothing in terms of the political process. So we have several things to talk about. How important to register to vote, how important for us is to really vote, no matter what. Number three is to be able to live in districts where we can make a difference and demand the political map to be drawn, because it is true. You look at Chicago, you can see how these political maps been drawn to satisfy the Latino community, the African American community, now the Korean and others. And so we have to learn the name of the game. But I think one of the most important one, and that's what I want to see how we're going to build that for the 2020 is to build coalitions and alliances with other minorities who can share with you a certain agenda. Because we cannot do it alone, we know that. We can have very good candidates, just like Abdul and others. We had very fine people who ran for different offices. But again, the political game, it says, you need to build alliances and coalitions. How important that is for 2020 in order for us to become major players in politics. Can you please give us a little bit on this particular issue?
On building coalitions.
Building coalition alliances with other minorities where we can really bring our vote, because there are some elected officials who feel secure, and when you come to talk to them about issues, they dismiss you because they don't feel threatened by your vote. For instance, in Chicago, we played one thing. We were able to build some alliances with other minorities who share with us certain issues. Now that candidates start to feel the heat and now start to come down and willing to negotiate with you. So that particular issue of alliances and coalitions in politics, how important is it?
So building coalitions, I think, is probably the most important thing after just getting folks to register to vote. I want to draw your attention to a report that we did at ISPU, at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, excuse me. We actually did 4 case studies on building coalitions, on what works, what doesn't, how people built coalitions to address a common concern. And I think one of the most fascinating coalitions that just proves that this is the only way to really address common concerns was the one in New York City, and this is a coalition that Linda Sarsour was a very active and prominent leader in. What New Yorkers figured out is that the same institution that was targeting African Americans and Latinos in New York City with stop and frisk was the same institution that was targeting the broader Muslim community with mass surveillance. And instead of addressing these problems as separate, these groups came together and addressed them together and were able to win against the most powerful and the largest police force in the country. That is huge, and it would have been impossible without a coalition. Building coalitions is hard work. Building coalitions is full of compromise, and it's full of long meetings and work that is not glamorous. But it is absolutely crucial. One thing I learned, just to point this out, one thing I learned in my role as a member of President Obama's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships is how little access matters in gaining influence when you don't have the organizing power on the ground. We believe, I think many of us believe, that access is the same as influence, and it's not. Being at the table, even meeting with the president, does not give you influence. What gives you influence is access plus organizing. If you don't have organizing, if you don't organize people and money, if you don't build coalitions, that access is just a photo op. It doesn't change anything. And that's what we need to do. We need to do our homework. We need to organize so that when we do have access, it counts. We can actually make an impact. And the way we do that is by building coalitions.
Thank you. Dr. Abdul, you have been running on a Democratic ticket as a Democrat. You know, the Muslim community traditionally, until 2001, predominantly Republicans. We share some of the conservative views, and all along we've been leaning Republicans, if you will. Probably many of you remember in 2000 when a coalition of Muslim organizations endorsed George Bush in his election. Until 2001, which is unfortunate tragedy, that changed things, and now Republicans adopted the right-wing views and started to go after Muslim, and Islamophobia became very invigorated and supported and given really a larger platform to go after Muslims. So now Democrats came to the support of Muslims. And now you ran as a Democrat. Do you run as a Democrat because Democrat willing to adopt minorities like ourselves, who are the underdog, who are been bashed by a president who supposedly for all Americans, he wants to ban Muslims, who wants to have the scrutiny of Muslims, who wants to have surveillance against Muslims, and obviously was not really that encouraging for Muslims to look, towards the president as a source of hope. So do you think that running with the Democrat is because of that, or do you think that Democrat platform provides an issue-oriented for any American Muslims who want to run for election? Because that debate is always there. Democrats are very progressive, sometimes not quite in line with our own values. But at the same time, we are threatened, actually existential threat, by the right wings who claim to be Republicans. How do you balance where you think that I do have a values, but the Democratic Party is providing me this? I have some concern, not necessarily as you, as Abdul, but you ran as Democrat. But there are many out there that still have that questions. Republicans do have some conservative views that line up with us, but at the same time, they support Islamophobes who want to uproot us from this land. The Democrats are very progressive, yet they're very supportive with us. How do you handle that kind of challenge?
So I just think, number one, I may disagree a little bit with the premise of the question. I think for as many Muslims as there are different value sets. And there are some Muslims who see themselves lining up and mapping on to American conservatism. Some people see themselves lining up and mapping on to progressivism. And so I just think we sometimes do ourselves a disservice when we assume that all Muslims have the same values. I'm a progressive, and let me explain why. I believe that one of the biggest challenges that we face in this moment is extreme inequality and a structure that upholds that extreme inequality. A system by which you have huge corporations that are fundamentally anti-capitalist because they're able to use their capacity to be large, to rent seek and control markets. And in doing that, they also have the potential to dominate our politics. That, I think, is an existential threat to our democracy, and certainly an existential threat to the well-being of minority communities and the poor. I do believe that government has a real responsibility to invest in some basic public goods, like education, like infrastructure, like healthcare. And I believe that our responsibility in the world is not to impose so that we can control resources for those large corporations, but rather to empower and to uphold a basic set of ideas. That's what I believe. There are some folks who reasonably could say, I disagree with you, and that would be okay. But that's why I ran as a progressive. That's where my beliefs are. I also think that there's a real responsibility to make sure that you're building coalitions with people who believe in your right to practice and pray and be as you are, rather than to say that there is one monolith And if you don't look like that, then you should be excluded from We the People. That's where I've informed my political beliefs. Now, I think as a community, we've got a lot of growing up to do. And we've got to start asking ourselves what our responsibility is to this pluralistic society. What does it mean for us to build coalitions that empower all of us, even if as individuals we may disagree with the people with whom we're building a coalition with on X, Y, or Z issue. But coalition building by definition means that we empower each other, that we show up for each other, and that we're partnering with people who believe in our capacity to be and do and exist in this America. And for all of those reasons, right, I see myself as a progressive. Now, I have deep disagreements with a lot of folks in my own party. And I think all of us do right now. It's a particular time. But at the same time, the question becomes, when the broader picture is told, what are we advocating for? What are our ideals? Who is interested in the Muslim issues of solving racism and solving poverty and empowering people who have been downtrodden? And just to switch tack real quick, oftentimes we think that the one thing that we have is our vote. Yes, that is true. But you've got a lot more than that. The magic formula in politics, as they say it, is dollars and doors. Dollars, how much money can you fundraise? Unfortunately, our broken political system costs a lot of money. My campaign raised $5.5 million, and we were outraised by every other Democratic campaign in the state. Doors is the ability to just get your message out on the doors, to have people who are knocking on doors and having conversations with voters. My challenge to you, if you're here at like 11 o'clock to hear about politics and Muslims, is to make sure that you are not an only voter. Vote, definitely. Don't ever, ever let them take your voice from you. But beyond voting, sign up to volunteer for a candidate that you like. Give $1, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever it is, give to those candidates. I'll tell you one thing. The one time that you have a candidate's ear is the time that you're about to write them a check. They will listen to anything you have to say. Make sure that you use that. In our community, we have those resources. 80% of our community is 80% under the age of 40. We've got time, we've got energy, and alhamdulillah, we've got resources. We should use them.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Yeah, we know that although we're talking about how the Democrats are way progressive, sometimes way too much progressive, that kind of made, the other side really on alert and coming so much, but we still vote probably about maybe some 80+% Democrats within the Muslim community. So yeah, we know that, despite all of that, it's kind of complicated, but we know it is a discussion on the dinner table with the Muslim community about these issues, which is very important and very good. The more we discuss things, the more we are educated and informed. Going to 2020, I'm just going to ask questions with the 5 minutes remaining. This is kind of thrown in the future, although we know it's important, and as you said, we really need to get the people to get engaged, knock the doors, send the message out, be vibrant. I'm going to take different questions. Do you think Donald Trump will make it 2020 to run again, and would he have listening ears? I'm going to ask this question, the same question to both of you. Knowing what the president, the people would like to have fun at the last minute of the do you think the president, with his current messages, that he is lashing left and right, would have listening ears in 2020 to make another 4 years? The president has been lashing at left and right. Do you think the American people, after all this, they have the appetite for 4 more years? And let's sleep on that after this.
I think we would be naive to think that beating the current president in 2020 will be easy or is a given. And I've heard people say, as if it's just it's a fait accompli, like it's just going to happen. I think it's going to be a very difficult fight, and I'm not at all convinced that it's going to that it will necessarily happen. I think it's a very real possibility that he will serve another 4 years. And I say that because we literally are living in two parallel universes, and I'm not even exaggerating. The way that many of us, perhaps in this room, are viewing his presidency, and the way that much of his base are viewing his presidency, is like we are living in two different worlds. They think he is doing everything he promised, and he is fighting the system, and everyone's against him, and the establishment is against him, and he's this rebel fighting the good fight against corruption, an outsider who's defending the rights of America. And he's like a heroic, almost prophetic figure. And I'm not even kidding. I didn't realize how stark the differences in our perception is, and until you go into these small towns in places where he has strong support, and you just listen to people speak about him. It's astounding. It's really remarkable. So I just don't think we should ever make the same mistake we made in 2016, thinking that this was never going to happen or was impossible. I think he actually has a very strong and very vibrant and very energized base who believe that he is doing everything he promised. Now, I think the mistake that we would make, and I see this in what I would call the establishment Democrats, not the progressive side of the party, but the establishment side of the party, is they are learning the wrong lesson from 2016. They think that what they did wrong is they weren't sort of like whistleblowing racist enough. And if they can just be a little bit more appealing to a more parochial kind of white working class sensibility to take some of those votes away from Trump, then they'll win. And they have it completely wrong. If you look at when Democrats have won in places where they had never won before, like in Alabama, in the Senate race, it wasn't by whistleblowing to racists. It was by energizing a group that has never voted before. It was by increasing turnout. If we were to increase turnout, and that's really how Obama won, if we were to increase turnout of young people, of people of color, we would win. But Democrats aren't getting that. They're learning the wrong lesson. Establishment Democrats especially, they, I think, are learning the wrong lesson from 2016.
Thank you. Dr. Abdul?
The way a demagogue like him works is that he occupies our entire conversation. All I will say about him, because he does not warrant any of my breath, is that if we underestimate him, we will lose. There is a large proportion of Americans in a deeply polarized society who take everything we look at and say that's ridiculous and say that's exactly what we want. That being said, there is a tremendous opportunity to reach those folks, those same exact folks, with a message that speaks to the challenges that they face without speaking to the means by which they think those challenges exist. What Donald Trump does is he shows those challenges within the lens of white nationalism. That's how he works. Our job is to talk about those same challenges within the lens of inequity and broken systems of politics. And we can reach those folks without speaking the same language that he is speaking, that he is talking about. But more importantly, we don't control national politics, we control ourselves. And the question is, do you want to live under another 4 years of a Donald Trump presidency? And if you say no, then what I would recommend you do is ask yourself how much of your time, how much of your money and how much of your next several years is going to be focused on helping elect a different president in 2020. And then organize within your local community, start knocking on doors, start holding fundraisers, start having those conversations. Don't watch CNN, don't watch Fox News, don't watch MSNBC. That doesn't help. All that time you would have spent cursing at the TV when you see his face, don't do that. Focus on getting somebody else elected. My hope is that our community comes out in 2020. We show our capacity to move the public conversation, to be a part of a winning coalition, to invest our time and our resources, hopefully so that we don't have to talk about this guy the next time we're up here.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. With that was truly the message that we want to send out. 2020, all of you want you to be participant, engaging, knocking doors, making sure that our voice is heard, that we are part of the political process. This session was a trial. I hope that you can rate it. You can tell us if this is something that we would like to continue for the future. But we thought we need to bring a discussion to our community on some of the important issues and some of the hot issues. Please thank our guests for sharing their thoughts with us, and give yourself a round of applause for staying late tonight and watching our show. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.